celebrate the University Gallery's 30th anniversary and is a way to celebrate three important artists and three previous gallery directors whose landmark exhibitions are now part of the gallery's legacy. It's an honor to have Judy Pfaff and Elaine Posner back again to celebrate with us tonight. It was in 1982 that Elaine commissioned Judy to do an exhibition at the University Gallery. It was an exhilarating, site-specific installation. I can see from the photos today, which will be shown to you this evening, not having experienced the show. It was called BOA, and it brought a kind of revolutionary liveliness to the gallery at a time of a very exciting period of contemporary art history. Elaine Posner was curator of collections at the University Gallery from 1981 to 1984, and then she was director from 84 to 88. Throughout the 80s, she expanded the University Gallery's national and international reputation and its reach. And during that decade, Elaine introduced our audiences here in Amherst and the 5 colleges to leading contemporary artists such as Judy Pfaff, Vito Acconci, Martin Puryear, Richard Jonas, Donna Dennis, Dana Duran, Anish Kapoor, Aman Balbec was the first-time artist to show in this community, among many others. Elaine also helped define the gallery's mission, which was to focus its energy and resources to direct it to the creative process. And with this belief that contemporary art is the means by which the community can address the current moment in a critical manner, she encouraged artists to present new work and often had the gallery act as a producer, which was totally novel then as it is now. So Elaine thereby encouraged the creative process by providing artists with opportunities to explore their ideas in a highly supportive environment. Not only that, but she also furthered the University Gallery's pedagogical role by providing training, internships, hands-on experience to Umass students who were interested in preparing for careers as artists, art administrators, curators. And it's thanks to Elaine that University Gallery can proudly point to many people who are now in the art world who can say that they got their start here at the University Gallery through her training program. So it's this exciting dual function as both a teaching laboratory for students as well as an experimental laboratory for contemporary visual arts that I really hope to make as my mandate, starting with these early directors here and certainly promoted through Elaine's directorship, and something I hope to further in the years to come. After leaving the University Gallery in 1988, Elaine was then named curator of contemporary art at the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C., where she remained until 1990. And once again, it was a time that she commissioned Judy Pfaff to do a very important site-specific commission installation. The following year, she joined the Video Arts Center at MIT as curator, where she organized numerous landmark exhibitions such as Mirror Images, Women, Surrealism and Self-Representation, Joseph Kosu's Redefining the Context of Art, a Second Investigation of Public Media, Glenn Liggins, Skin Tight, The Massacre of Masquerade, The Angala and Nancy Spiro, War and Memory, Corporal Politics, Anne Hamilton, and Pierre Kirkby. In 1999, Elaine was a co-commissioner at the Venice Biennale at the United States Pavilion, where she organized a very memorable installation by Anne Hamilton. And then independent curator from 1999 to 2001, Elaine organized several traveling exhibitions across the U.S., including Cultural Violence, which came here to Amherst and which is still talked about in an ongoing catalog that's being distributed. In the year 2002, Elaine joined the American Federation of Arts in New York as curator of exhibitions, where she is currently preparing 2 very major exhibitions for a national and international tour. Laura Simpson, which is the first mid-career survey of work by this leading African-American artist, and Yoyo Kasama. This is the first retrospective by this pioneering Japanese artist. And just this past year, we're happy to bring back both Judy and Elaine to contribute to a lovely catalog, which is hot off the press and available for sale tonight. The exhibition of Sheila Pepe's, which occurred a year ago this time. It's an interview between Sheila and Judy and an introduction by Elaine. So happy to have them in our fold once again. So please join me in welcoming Elaine Posner, who will then introduce to you her good friend and colleague, Judy Pfaff.
Well, that's the most complete and lovely introduction I have ever received, Loretta. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for inviting me to be here tonight. I feel very happy being among so many old friends and some new faces. It's really a great pleasure. My introduction of Judy's is much briefer than that, Judy. Okay. Judy Pfaff, who is sitting next to me, was born in London and moved to the United States at age 13. She received a BFA from Washington University in St. Louis in 1971 and an MFA from Yale in 1973. And there she studied with the painter Al Held, who remained a lifelong friend. Judy enjoyed early success and, in fact, was included in the Whitney Biennale in 1975, just 2 years after she graduated from Yale. She joined Holly Solomon Gallery, where she exhibited for many, many years, and has continued to actively exhibit her work both nationally and internationally at museums and galleries. Judy Pfaff was a pioneer of site-specific installations in the late 70s, and is best known for her large, sprawling, colorful, and exhilarating works that incorporate a wide range of materials, both natural and industrial or manufactured. Her installations are often improvisational in nature and combine elements of painting, drawing, sculpture, and architecture. Judy has created more than 30 temporary installations since 1975 in numerous locations, including New York, Philadelphia, Washington, Denver, Cologne, Tokyo, Mexico, Brazil, and of course Amherst, Massachusetts. And in recent years, she's been invited to create public commissions and a stage set. Judy employs an inclusive vocabulary of organic and geometric forms and chooses images, materials, and colors that reflect the diverse locales in which she works. In 2004, she received a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship, which is commonly known as the Genius Grant. As curator of the University Gallery in 1982, I had the privilege of working with Judy on an extremely vibrant and dynamic installation titled Boa, which took shape in the North Gallery, which measures 8 by 10 by 60 feet. When you enter this work, you were visually and physically immersed in a variety of colors, shapes, and forms that emerged from the gallery's walls, ceilings, and floor. Judy created a visceral passageway that was, in her words, like moving through a giant intestine. In Boa, as in all of her work, she combines enormous energy, nearly verging on chaos, with an unexpected mastery of structure, skillfully balancing 2- and 3-dimensional form. Her installations are, in a sense, exuberant performance works. Judy is going to give a presentation on her work, including still and some video images, after which I will begin by posing some questions, and of course, we welcome questions from the audience. Okay.
I drove in today, and my memory is, and the shock of seeing this place was exactly the same as it was. I keep remembering everything the way I want it to be. So I always thought Amherst was this quaint, little, woodsy place, and the gallery was going to be like timbered, and there would be guys, you know, with their flannel shirts, and not a one did I find. And I didn't know what I was going to do, which is usual. But I thought, it's a really little gallery, and I thought, great. I don't have to think about it, I don't have to prepare for this, but I did buy 3 chainsaws. A little one, a medium, and a big one, for all the trees that I was going to cut down. And the funny thing was that Richard Nonis, who is a really, really good artist, who is a minimalist, both of us went to the store, the lumberyard, and bought our wood. And I bought a 20 by 20 by like 60-foot piece of lumber. He bought a 20 by 20 by 6, and so when it got delivered, both of us were saying, that's mine, and he was saying, no, that's mine. by the time I ended, mine was in 1 billion shards, and his was intact. And I think he was very smart. And but anyway, and I do think that I did learn a lot from him because he was a real sculptor. And I'm saying that because my background is as a painter. And I did this thing which I thought was incredibly brutal and tough, where I put something across. So you actually had to walk over, and I just thought that is so tough and aggressive and sculptural. And also there were things in it that were very curious to me, like there were these tubes that came out of the wall, and when you went by, if you were talking to a friend, the sound would throw back at you. So they had this sort of funny cone, voice, noise, and it was very psychological. So my idea was to have this lovely, light, you know, feathery, it was like being eaten by a boa constrictor. And very, or like being in a closet and scratching your way out. There was something that I don't think has ever been identified in my work, which is actually always there, that there's the dark side. Meaning that it's never, I think it's always seen as sort of happy work. I have never seen this stuff as particularly happy work, and I am not particularly a happy, you know, like that's not my, like in the 70s, 80s, and with the graffiti kids, I think they really made stuff out of a kind of joy and a kind of mischief. So I think I'm going to go through these slides very quickly. And because of the way I am put together, I always think that everything is sort of part of some big continuum. Therefore, we will always meet and we will do something, you know what I mean? It's like, and we were just together 2 nights ago.
That's right.
In a whole nother, I can't even get into it, place and time. But let me show you these slides. I will go through them quickly, and then Helena and I will talk. We'll talk. And the lights come way down, and the projector. By the way, people are totally freaked out that I bought slides. So it's the old-fashioned way.
Just advance them.
Oh, I'm controlling this. Huh, yes.
Judy? Yes, the mic is here.
Okay. I will come back. Do we need all of that? Anyway, that's my studio in 1973 in New York City. $150 a month. I had 13 puppies, and when I came home from work, they had fixed everything. So it was always, I had stuff to do. I'm sorry, this is not self-focusing. So this is another studio and another sort of repertoire. Because I came out of painting, I decided I didn't like painters, or painting for that matter. I think because it threw you into a kind of conversation that was, you would never win. As soon as I started working with aluminum foil and styrofoam and contact paper, no one ever asked me any more questions. This is a real show. It was called Prototypes, and basically every image was based on a person that I knew and had my relationship with them built into it. I always say this at this point. The guy walking into the wall is Richard Archweiler. If you know Richard, he says it's more me than him. This is at the Neuberger. I don't know if you know this space. It's quite big. It's 100 feet long, 50 feet wide, and 30 feet tall. And this was a show where a lot of artists were shown at Artist Space before, where I also had a show, were shown. And what was great about it is I had just gotten a $10,000 CAPS grant, or an NEA, I think, an NEA. And so I could afford to do it, and that was great. And the venue was with wonderful artists. These are these drawings that I did tons of at the time, which were, the projections, they were quite big. That's probably about a 5 by 10 or 4 by 8 Mylars. This is about 14 feet long. And these are the drawings came before. And these are the pieces which sort of were, this is what they look like if they were sculptural. They're going to be very hard to see because the slides really flatten stuff out, but you're just going to have to believe that there was more space than it looks. 70, no, maybe 80, 81. Whitney Biennial. This is similar iconography to what I did here. And this was actually up in Bennington. This was at the Holly Solomon Gallery. I was represented by Holly, I think, and Ellen can attest to this. She was very unique. She was an artist dealer. She only used to say to me, "Can you do more? You could do outside, you could do the windows, we have a good basement, you know, come to my house." Every other place, they're like completely freaked out that you're, you know, very scattered and it seems never ending. She loved that feeling, by the way. This was in Germany. Venice Biennale. This was called Either War. At the time there were wars going on then too, Falkland Islands and some other place I've forgotten. And all of Italy sort of froze, not because of that, because of just funny strikes. But so it was I wanted to do something which was very connected to futurism and this thing about sound. This is that little space. It's the only slide I could find of it. I have others, but I don't think there's time to do that. But so I think you can see it's quite dense and unrecognizable, meaning probably every square inch of the gallery was covered. And you could touch the lights. You know, I mean, they were
It's got an 8-foot
bigger,
ceiling.
it was an 8-foot ceiling, and they were coming down. This is at the Albright Knox. I was very interested in all these different languages: hard, soft, structural, meandering, high, low. You know, my head likes, if I get too far to one side, it's just a knee-jerk reaction to cancel it and to pull it back. There are always mini stories. With this one, this is in Buffalo. And this was the Clifford Still room. So the first thing I did instinctively is to give it back to Clifford Still for a moment and then cancel it back. It was called Rock, Paper, Scissors. It's actually one of my favorite pieces in that it related to the entire collection of the Albright Knox, which is a great, great American collection. And so it was sort of an homage to all of those guys. Even though the imagery is similar to all the other ones that came before it, there was I think you could tell there was a more specificity in coming aside someone who is, that you admire. Again, that's in Italy. These slides, I guess, are a little... This is a show I did at Holly Solomon's. It's the only time I've ever done a show in the same space. I think probably 5 years had gone by. I was pretty nervous because I just didn't know if I would recall the first piece and do it again. Obviously, I didn't. But you're looking through 60, 70 feet of space, so I know it looks very compressed. But I thought when I made this that it was a funny thing to think, but I thought, this is everything I know. This is it. this is my whole ball of wax. This is the bag of all, not tricks, but this is all my loves, everything I think about, all the spatial concerns. It referenced, there were even things that referenced, cave painting in there, and city images, and it's basically, vortexes. And so I really wanted, and I still do with all of the pieces, this kind of vitality where you don't know where to sit or stand, and there's a nervousness, not because anything's going to hurt you, but you keep putting things together because you're getting different information. Now, no one does this. I'm talking to myself. People come in and say, oh shit, that's a lot of stuff, or how did she do that, or what's that made of, or I like it or I don't like it. But I think if you do install somewhere and you are really making it up, at least a lot of it as you go, you have to be quite keen about what's happening inside of yourself, outside of yourself, and how to make it real. Otherwise, you're like a monkey on a stick or something. There's, I don't know how many metaphors like that I've been giving. It's, I'll clean it up really soon. And I called it 3D, which is pretty stupid title because it means nothing. But every time I gave a title like Deep Water, they would say, oh, it's an aquarium. Or dragon. Oh, I see the dragon. Or I don't know. It was just like, so I thought, don't say anything because keep it abstract. Because this one, it was probably, so anyway, it had a bad title. I stopped and went back to my old self. This is images of me working a long time ago in Japan. I think you can tell there's something happening here. It's cleaner. It's cleaner. It's because Japan is very clean. And everybody kept cleaning things for me, which I thought was really nice. And they would sand things. And then they wouldn't touch them because it was sacrosanct at that point. So culturally, it was very odd. What's happening here is a space similar to the Guggenheim, and you're going up a spiral. The building was called Spiral. And I thought I was making this tableau towards all the things that I had experienced in Japan. Ikebana and the gardens and woodcuts and the architecture. And there's actually a lot of signage in here. And if you could read Japanese, it would say tree, river, mountain, things like that. And it ended up that everybody who worked with me, and I didn't realize this, it's about the Japanese naming, is everybody's name was east of river and south of the mountain and stuff. So they were sort of identified in there, plus the word was in there too. So, by the way, this horrified the Japanese. You're supposed to be able to walk on it and experience it, and you would be able to read things, and so you would like it more, or you would know that I liked you. They thought that I was kind of a mocking. So I think, lost in translation, when I saw that, I thought, wow, yeah. And I actually stayed in the same place. That's the Akasaka Prince in Tokyo. Anyway, did I digress? I came back from Japan. I'm never going to make any more installations. That's it. I've lost every friend because I forgot to call them, and I'm not sleeping, and I can be a grump or whatever. So I decided to make nice things, wall things, and Holly had moved uptown. And I was mortified because the ceilings were very low, and there was a lot of architecture in there. And given my storytelling penchant, I didn't know what story to tell in these little motifs, so I decided I would make her still lifes, because I thought, artists, you do landscapes, you do portraits, you do still lifes. I did the landscape thing. I did some portraits, so I'd never done still lifes, so this was all based on still life structures. The show was called Apples and Oranges. This photograph was taken in Holly's house. Every time a camera crew came by, she would get all dressed up and sit in front of that. I think it's because it had a crown in it, you know. I always tell this story. This is in John the Weber Gallery. I think this is very Stuart Davis. And I was very involved in like signage. I just moved to Brooklyn and everything was sort of bodegas and very graphic, a lot of awnings and stuff. And I was at this thought about being American, and I liked that a lot. On the other side was Sol LeWitt, who is a great guy and a great artist. And he had all these circles, but the wall was black and it was all these chalk drawings. And I keep thinking this, it's like we both had the same homework. And he came back with his resolution and I came back with mine, and I knew he'd done better. You know that feeling like, oh, he got the A.
Judy has some videos that she's going to show in the interim.
These were done last night. They're really bad. It's a little, I feel like, you know, the dog ate my homework.
What are we looking at here, Judy?
Oh my gosh. This is a show that was at Amherst. I think you can tell there's a lot of motifs. It's very clean now, it's very architectural. The show was called Neither Here Nor There. And this is frozen, I don't know what's going on. It was working, I swear. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going to try another one. Hang in there. This is great. The slides broke down and the computer broke down. That's good, no?
You have to dance.
I can do that. What you're looking at here is very rough footage of a stage set. This is Cottonwood Tree, and the opera that I was building was called Regina, so somehow the cottonwood's blowing through. This footage was taken one day, so all I do is paint here. This is Jamie Hamilton, who is probably the best welder. This is Shelley. She just worked for a few weeks, and she was given to me by the theater department at Bard. Rachel came in as a helper. She looks good, no?
Great arms.
It's Ryan, who was my student at Bard. This is my studio in upstate New York in Tivoli.
This is, Judy built a stage set for an opera called Regina that was in Bard last summer. Is that right, Judy?
Yes, that's my dog Willie. The studio flooded every other week. I don't know if you remember the summer, there were floods. It just rained like crazy. So I just want to put some realism into this stuff. Willie is a lab, so he loves this. This is Rob Van Erp, who has been with me for a long time, in different capacities. We were married for 10 years. So. Nothing is working. Sorry. Let me get to the end of it. So I can, yeah, here we go. Now we're on the stage, which is very similar to this. It's not as big. It's a period piece, so all of the opera takes place basically in a living room. So this is sort of an expanded living room. What's very funny, you see that thing that's happening because it's digital? It actually happened because there were so many louvers in there. This is Laura Flanagan, great voice, great actor. I figured out how to do out of focus really well. I have never seen these things. They're so weird. I'm sorry. I kind of like it, but studio.
What year is this? What are we, Judy?
90. 90. I went to Pilchuck, so I was around a lot of glass blowers, and I got really fascinated with trying to do air, volumes of air, and wind and things. 90, 91. And also all the color went out. It's a studio.
It's a real shift in materials here.
Real shift in materials. I got very involved in anything viscousy and sort of snotty and like tar and anything like tenuous. I think it's because of my love of Kiki Smith. I think I have to credit her with giving me a kind of a new metaphor about the body. And that I kept thinking everything was about the outside, and then I realized that everything's always, of course, about the inside. So for me, that was that's upside down. It's a dark Brandeis. So everything became much more internalized and moody for a while. The last couple slides you saw, there was actually a black room and a white room, and it was the year 2000, and I was invited by a Mormon school called Brigham Young University, where you actually have, it's 100% Mormon, and I had to sign papers that I would honor a moral code and not drink coffee. I snuck it in the garage, not inside the institution. But because it was the year 2000, I don't know if you remember, there was a certain nervousness about what was going to happen. And I was in Walla Walla, and I was very nervous there. I was there for almost 7 months, and this show was spliced in between. So I had a white room and a black room. The black room was these burnt old growth logs, and the white room was this old plaster and foam. I'm now living upstate, teaching at Bard College, and I'm on the river, right next to the Hudson, and an old, beautiful old tugboat factory. So most of this stuff is really zen-y for me, and I think it's just about the river and the time and a kind of sensation when you're sort of not in New York. This is Brazil. What's interesting about the space for me was no one had ever used it because it had all these windows. It was an exhibition space basically for industrial machines made by Oscar Niemeyer. Oscar Niemeyer? Why does that sound like sausages? Oscar Mayer. And I looked at all the floor plans, and everyone had blocked up all the windows. So, of course, for me, that inside-outside thing was really great. And the park outside is called Ibirapuera, which is it's the equivalent of Central Park. So there was lots of people who came in and out. This floor pattern was based on 2 churches, which were there. Not that that means much, but it gave me a way to deal with what I thought was a heavy Catholicism, and make a kind of way to reference for me what I was seeing and sensing, I guess. This is my studio in that tugboat factory, one part of it. Pasadena. In Columbus, Ohio, and all I can remember is I used to teach there in 1973 of being in the middle of a snowstorm, so I gave it back to them. This is the Elvium in Madison, Wisconsin. I think you can tell there's a kind of real cleaning up and a clarification of things. Very architectural. I don't think they're as dry as they look. I think when you experience them, there are lots of vignettes which are sort of hard to see, and the making of them is still as messy as ever. But I needed a kind of clarity, and I think what I've always noticed is my work sort of follows my really internal needs. This was done in Savannah, Georgia. It was right after the World Trade Centers fell down. I live real close to them in New York City. And Savannah was like a town of reconstruction, so I decided to sort of do this thing which pulled off all the motifs from a lot of the molding, and I restored a lot of the things which were inside, which is also what I was doing in my house upstate. So there was certain ways in which that, trying to come to grips, or not even, I don't even think like that, but it felt like that's what I was doing, is repairing something and dealing with very old ways of working. This was in California. It was a chapel I made. A good friend of mine had just committed suicide, and it's called Capella Chapel. This is what you were trying to see in that little movie, which was a show at, it was a couple of years ago now. I think what's hard to know about when you look at these kinds of things is what the experience of them. None of this imagery really was the force of this show. My experience of it was there was these south-facing windows, and because of the architecture in New York City, the light is very specific, and it flung through that gallery between 1 and 4 like you couldn't believe. It was kaleidoscopic, and there was things in the window which caught that, but it had a real sense that you were alone, and you had a lot of space, and you were on this funny speeded up trip, like now you're in America. There was motifs which really were like China or the pagan plain or American architecture. So it had, for me, a nice melding of all the things, you know, that one sees and acquires. Also, I think that I never really do things about where I really am, but where I think I am. therefore Amherst never looks quite right to me once I get here. Anyway, thank you.
Could we turn up the lights now, please?
These lights are brutal.
I know they are. Thank you very much, Judy. That was nicely done, but I think it'd be nice if we could see the audience. I have a few questions I'm going to ask you, some open-ended things. Could you talk a little bit about your working process? How do you go about planning an installation, and what do you think is the balance between planning and spontaneity in your work?
I think I start with a kind of panic, and then I go and see the space. And usually there's an impression, you know, sort of like a sense of feeling, or and also scale. You know, the space here is a little tunnel, and it has no light, and it's, you know, you go down through and out. So that guided a lot. So the space dictates a lot. Also, you know me enough that something's usually going on in my life that I make it go in there. As abstract as these works look, I think that's why the palette changes, the you know, sometimes they're very geometric, sometimes they're very gritty, or it just has to follow that, but it starts out very slowly. I tend to gather momentum. It's like a snowball going down a hill. And usually, and this is really so, I'm not even exaggerating, the moment the piece is finished, meaning the door opens and I have to be finished, is the first time I get a sense of what I was doing. So I don't go in with a lot of knowledge. I just trust that it'll have something, and usually I fight for that. So it's very hard. I'm very hard on institutions and people who work in institutions, because the need to know and to anticipate, and what is she going to need, what's it going to be about, how do I write coherently about this thing. And I can usually give you an overview, like with the opera set. I knew it had to be a period piece. I just restored a big Victorian house, so I thought I knew the iconography. The text needed things, but basically we were building that on stage because I didn't know what anything looked like from out there. So there's, I think, 33%, even though that was very, very done before I got there, there was at least 33% that was not only undone, but I left it undone because I knew I needed that to make it work for me.
Is there ever a preliminary sketch, or is it all in your head?
Yeah, like the sketches would be like those drawings I showed you, which I think look exactly like those other things, but it isn't that shape is that piece of wood. So yeah, there are drawings. Most of the drawings there do a lot of drawings, but they're never specific. It's not. They're not like this is this. So it's not like that. You know, a lot of artists really can do that. I like those things when you watch the Academy Awards and they have the set designer and they do this like thing, and then they overlay
and they show you how it materializes.
And it's like, how did they do that? How did they? I mean, I'm stunned that anyone can ever know before it's built what it will be. And I don't visualize like that. I get sensations more than I do. Also, that gallery keeps shrinking every time I see it. It's incredible, you know.
Until you try to build it.
Until you try and build it, and it gets like monstrous, my monster, you know. So I have no idea how the mind works. I keep thinking I'm going to redefine the word genius from now on to like, will be nothing at the end. But, you know, I don't know how the mind works. It is not logical. I don't think, I mean, basically what I can do now is think, I know what I'm supposed to wear. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know they need this from me. But I'm really still playing that out. Because it's like and I keep thinking, just give me the space and go away. And tell me when it's supposed to be over. And I will finish it.
I think that answer and the way you answered it gave good insight into your working process. It's just a sort of an evolution of ideas, very generalized, that take form like this. One of your big contributions to sculpture and installation has been the emphasis on color, which you use in a lot of different ways. And as we all know, color has been dismissed as being superficial or decorative. Can you describe why color is important to you and how you use it?
Oh yeah, when I was at Yale, I worked actually a little bit for Albers.
Really?
Yeah. But I thought he was wrong. I was keen on Madame Blavatsky. You know, I like the kind of the other side of color, not just the optical and just like this does that and this advances it. All of those theories, I think they work for their time, and they work. I mean, they operate like completely well. And actually, his work is not just about that. But anyway, I really almost always went to like the like sometimes I would for the show called Dragon, which was at the Whitney. It was all heraldic color. It was all from the medieval time. And I needed it. That's what I wanted to have that kind of aspect. So, and if it's another kind of thing, I will choose a palette which has that emotional, and I'm not choosing it as much as I find that that's working. And then I think, oh, I guess that was a choice. There was a time when everything was just silver and gold. I just couldn't get enough of that. My friend John Toriano used to say he made things which were champagne for the eyes, and I used to think that like silver and gold just does that. So you can't identify the space. It's like the piece of Torres outside. It's like you just sink into it. It's like it has something otherworldly, and those are sugar candies. You know, I mean. So yeah, color is the prime mover. It's just the prime mover. I'm upset that artists give away lately all the things which are the most intense. Color, chaos, improvisation, incredible amount of creativity, ad hoc decision. You know, it's all sort of professional, much more professional. I'm so glad I'm my age because I keep saying I can get away with it now. But I think there's a lot of things which are being, like the baby being thrown out with the bathwater. I don't know where all these things are coming in. It's like full of garbage.
Why do you think that's the case?
I think because it's no, I think it's more business. I think dealers need to know. I think curators need to know. I think people who write criticism need to have things. And the art has been given, I think the art is now shared between artist and curator, where I think in the old days it was mostly like, you do this thing and I'll try to catch up or identify it and put it into place. Now it's like worked out together, which I think is curious. I'm making
for installation work.
I think for most, I think for most things, for a lot of things. Because I'm at Bard, I'm with a lot of young curators. And they do not really, they never come to the studio, not my studio, they never come to the graduate student studios or the undergraduate studios. And I had them curate shows for the undergraduates, and I thought, great, this will be, I'm like tricking them. They'll have to meet everybody, go to the studio, and make decisions. They didn't. They said, we're going to do a show where everything will be under 2 feet by 2 feet, and be about this and that, and it's like, they never met anybody. And the most
is that what they're
powerful,
teaching them at Bard?
I think so. I don't know. I might have been just the ones. But that kind of thing. They didn't want to get dirty or confused. Not dirty as much as confused. Because if you have an idea, when you meet someone, everything, you know, even if you think...
You're affected by it.
You're affected by it. That movie star is too short. He's a jerk.
Well,
I don't know any movie stars, but you know, when I see them interviewed on TV.
When we worked at the University Gallery, one of the things we got regularly was dirty on the floor and confused, but we managed to pull it off.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you one more formal question, then we'll open it up to the audience. Your work is informed by the formal concerns of modernism. You can see elements of constructivism, cubism, futurism, abstract expressionist gesture, among other sources in your installations. You have also successfully reinvigorized and feminized the modernist tradition. For example, blurring the boundaries between media, focusing on color and sensuality, expressing a range of emotions, and emphasizing accessibility. How do you think being a woman working in a male-defined tradition has affected your work?
All I know is when any guy works with me, he loses his mind. I always thought that Holly Solomon, Izar Patkin said that I was the only butch person in the gallery. You have to understand everybody was working with cloth and flowers, and I came, my welder and, like making a mess and trucks and things like that. So, and in the early days of feminism, I was not a woman artist, because then the iconography had to be vaginas or quilts or
the essentialist phase.
The essentialist phase. So, I became a woman artist in the eyes of other women a few years ago, because I do think what happened is the work was always seen as very formal. No, it wasn't seen as very formal. Now it's seen as formal because it's more formal. But I think it was just seen as
chaotic.
Chaotic. Explosion in a glitter factory.
Right.
Followed me around for about 15 to 20 years. I have never used glitter. That's what I thought was hysterical, And actually nothing was ever made without thoughtfulness about the size, this surface, this is the right primer, is that the right material for this? I mean, in a pinch, I've never used a hot glue gun. They make me crazy. I don't even, I like it when it's snotty. I mean, I like the stuff that comes out of it, but I don't like it as an adhesive. It's not an adhesive. So, what was the question?
The question was about feminism. And your relationship to feminism.
What I liked once is this essay that was written by Linda Nochlin for your show. And she identified that chaotic part in terms of the way, like, Pollock was seen as heroic, and his journey into that kind of wildness was seen as, like, not only manly and courageous and going into the depths of things, but when a woman, not that I was doing that, even approached that, it was seen as chaotic, disheveled, hysterical, without form.
Uncontrolled.
Where the same exact aspects, not the look of it, but the same exact things, the language changed. So I always thought just, how would things be seen if it was made by a man? And I liked the idea. I think I always wanted to be a guy. I kept beating up my brother.
And you're very hands-on.
I'm very
Very
hands-on.
physical.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. But it's not manly. That's what's so funny. My way of approaching things, I'm always, if someone is working with me, it's like, don't do that yet, because I haven't circled it enough. I don't really know. It'll come to me. So I really I'm very elliptical and very circular, not just in ideas, but even how I get to an answer.
I'd like to open it up to the audience now. We have...
And I started making very tiny things, literally tiny things. And I don't know if you remember, but the first things were like styrofoam and aluminum foil and wire. So it was not heavy-duty material. And then I started, it's like, also there was a lot of interesting artists then, still are. That was Linda Bankless, Anne Surratt, Joel Shapiro. Joel was a humble, nice, easygoing guy in the early days. Meaning he made things which were more fragile. Now, very small, tiny, intimate things, and now, they're 15 feet tall in front of museums. But it just gathered, and I was given some opportunities really early on. I was given artist space, which was a great space. I was in the Whitney Biennial 2 years later. So it was in the air to be offered. Also being a young artist, you have great power as a young artist. That people give you a lot of opportunities if you have a lot, if someone thinks you have something to offer. And I started teaching at Queens College, I taught at Ohio State, I taught at Yale, I taught at Cal Arts. So I always had a job. I also restored brownstones, did roofing, and a lot of things. So I got my hands on a lot of materials. And it was easier then. Space was easier, accommodating. You were always building your loft and stuff, so you always had stuff around. I was given a lot of opportunities, and it just escalated all the time.
I really appreciate your telling us how you made your living, because it's always a question, always curious about that.
Absolutely. I go to Chelsea and I walk into shows and I think, how did they afford to do this?
And how does the gallery afford to
How does a gallery afford to have one piece per 10,000 square feet? Yeah, it is curious. I remember literally an artist space 2 days before the opening of the show in tears because I had run out of money, and Al Held, who had nominated me, chosen me to show there, did this very interesting thing. I had some little piece and he said, would you take $200 for that? He's tough. He was tough. Not real tough, but, and I said, okay, that would be really good. Do I have to give it to you now? Because it's going over there. And so he pulled me out of that. Little things like that. I got a $2,000 CAPS grant suddenly when I needed it. I got a $10,000 NEA grant. There are things out there. And I just got this grant which puts into my bank account every 3 months, $25,000. It is like, and I've had it now for 1 whole year, I'm on cloud 9, except my life is the worst it's ever been. So, who knew that all your dreams don't mean a thing when other things are kind of collapsing around you? But yeah, for some reason, I just think you just have faith that it'll be there, and there are very good people out there, and it works. It worked for me quite naturally.
We are short on time, so I want to be sure to get at least another couple of questions in. Sir?
When you're working,
Chris?
you
Sir, Chris.
You have the open-ended desire in the gallery. What about the time element? Because obviously you have a beginning time you can come in.
It used to be.
You've got to be done.
It feels like beat the clock. It still does.
What would you like it to be longer, or do you like the limit?
We're talking about the time frame that Judy has to build an installation.
My second Whitney Biennial, I had 4 days, and I was sick, really sick. I mean, I had a flu. And I was like hallucinating, basically. And then I thought, give me a day. But I think you monitor yourself. If you have, it's like that, goldfish that fills the size of the container. You just grow to whatever it is, and So you come in sort of saying, this is going to be 3 all-nighters. This is going to, and you clock it. Once, to everyone's dismay at the Albright Knox, I didn't finish. I mean, I finished it, it was respectable. No, trust me, they thought enough already. But I came back, and it was so much better. I knew what I needed to get out of it was not there. And I think after it ended, that they were things, but it's the only time I ever didn't finish, to my satisfaction.
Over here?
Work after the show's over.
What happens to the work after the show is over?
For the components.
One of these little movies that doesn't work, showed it going, you know, trashed, you know. Yeah. And there is, now the work has some lengths of steel in it which still have some integrity and are neutral enough that I could just make a chair out of it or do something. But it's nothing of what you see exists except the pieces which were small. They exist.
One more question, Honoré.
I'm interested in the time when your work evolved into bringing in natural elements like tree roots and plants.
Someone asked me,
And what happened to you that made you change? Very beautiful.
there are trees in everything. There's not a piece that I've done, and someone mentioned that to me, and I said, no, it was only in the early days. There has been I have made more failed gardens than anybody on the planet. I have roof ones, I have Brooklyn gardens, I have, you know, now I have a Victorian house and who knows. But I love that stuff. I love looking at all the things. I don't go to the forest. I'm not in woods, but I like stuff, and I like the botanical gardens right, rather than the forest. You know, I like all the way things are put together. So all of that sort of the way a botanist would just like that, and also then have to study that. I get to stop at liking that. You know, how it's put together. So I think a lot of the constructions are based on the way. A long time ago, I was around a lot of people who were involved in anthroposophy and Rudolf Steiner's stuff. And so I think some of that might have rubbed off, that kind of inclination towards nature informing, the body informing the structural stuff. Also, a lot of times there are a lot of structural things, and sometimes people who know how to rig and will sort of say, how did you figure that out? And I think, I never thought about it. It just needed this to stay together, and it had to be like this, because if it was like that, that image would be it would cancel. So I also like transparency and looking through layers and stuff. So I think when you go to a beautiful Japanese garden, it's that kind of experience of small, tiny, big, you know, with the architecture and holes through the architecture.
Well, I'd like to thank Judy for being as constantly illuminating and inspiring as she always has been for me, now that we've known each other for almost 25 years. And there's a reception at the gallery after this talk, and Judy will be there, so anybody who hasn't had a chance to ask her a question or just talk to her further, she'll be available. And thank you all for coming.